Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshinim Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Brutaduhe Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are now coming to, oh, sorry, did I do something? Yeah. Can everyone see it? I think I did something.
Yes.
No,
we cannot see your PowerPoint though.
Oh, you cannot. Okay. Okay. I don't know what I did. Let's see. Okay, let me go back and put it out again. I think somehow I closed it by mistake. Ocean screen. Yeah. Now you can see it, right? Okay. So we are almost on the penultimate lecture for the second chapter. This is the longest chapter in Bhagavad Gita. It has 72 shlokas, a very important chapter because it covers pretty much in brief most of the important concepts, especially of Karma Yoga, which is very important for us, and Jnana Yoga, which ultimately tells us about our own nature. On a very high level, all this is being dealt with. And finally, of course, about the Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, which we learned. So today we'll be covering the shlokas 69 to 72, because this is the last three shlokas where we come back to discussing about the Sthita Prajna Lakshana itself. Who is Sthita Prajna? Some things which actually now takes us almost deep into some of the concepts. And so for today, I think you might have to pay a little more attention because one or two shlokas might be a little confusing. So coming to a reflection time, today we have some really beautiful questions which Meena ji gave the question, so I'm going to discuss that. But before that, with everything that we have learned about Sthita Prajna, was there any particular quality of Sthita Prajna that appealed to you the most? So this is just, a random question. Of course, it ties in the last 5 shlokas that we did last week, but I want to throw this open to you because, again, we are learning from the Sthita Prajna Lakshanas. So who wants to go first? Was there any of the qualities that really appealed to you the most? Something that you felt that I can apply this to my life?
Samatvam. Oh, sorry.
Samatvam.
Yeah.
Samatvam, okay.
Good times and bad, yeah.
Yeah, so this dukkeshu anudvigna manaha, sukheshu vigata sprihaha, right? In that shloka, he talks a little bit about this being balanced. Very good.
Not being attached.
Not being attached, very good. So dhyayato vishayan pumsaha, from there on, we saw that how being attached leads to a lot of, the ladder of fall. Okay. Any other qualities that appeal to you? So think about this next week.
Self-satisfied.
What is that?
Self-satisfied.
Self-satisfied. Wow, that is definitely the core of all our actions, right? I mean, in many ways, we do a lot of the actions because there is something within us where there is a need, there's a sense of wanting or a sense of incompleteness.
And
So,
then unshaken by adversity.
Unshaken by adversity. Very good. Very
And
good.
it's always peaceful because there are no desires.
They're peaceful because of no desires. Very good. So hold that thought, Meenu, because today we're going to be discussing especially that point about
Control in senses. Control in senses.
controlling senses. Very good. Very good.
And
Yep.
then neither rejoice nor hate.
Neither rejoicing nor hating anybody. So important in, it's a quality all the time we need it, but in the sense of having a sense of oneness and love for everyone, there's no rejoicing or hating is an important aspect. Very good.
Practice art of detachment.
Art of detachment. Anita mentioned that too. Very good. Very good. Anything else? So you see, there are so many qualities, right? I mean, even though Sthita Prajna is considered to be a person of absolute perfection, but just by those qualities, they are sadhanas for us who are sadhakas in this path of not just spirituality, but even to do my job well, in order to be a good team player, in order to be able to take on some great decisions. For all this, we need the sense of detachment. That is detaching my lower self and attaching to something higher, right? So, and then team player, where you have the sense of, being always rejoicing my team works, team people's accomplishments, and not hating anybody or not being jealous. So you see, there's so much to learn from the Sthita Prajna Lakshana. So let me put these questions that Meena provided at the end of last week's session, because last week we talked a lot about the two shlokas, Raga Dvesha, Raga Dvesha Viyuktaistu Vishayan Indriyashcharan. So for this one, she had this question of, for a person who wants to go on the ladder of rise. So we are all those sadhakas, right? And is self-control the only way? Or do we also look at, if I chant the name of the Lord and I totally surrender myself at the feet of the Lord, will that help also? Extremely good question, because it brings this element of bhakti marga, and it also brings this self-effort. So which one is needed here, or do we need both? So that is a question, right? So my take on this one is they both go together. For example, if I just chant Lord Krishna's name and I totally surrender to Lord Krishna, but yet if when I face a difficulty, I face a lot of anxiety, so then what? So we need to chant Lord Krishna's name all the time. So Lord Krishna's name has to be like the Shruti, like the Shruti when a vocalist sings, right? It has to be constantly, for me, it should be part and parcel of each and every cell of me, where I'm chanting Lord Krishna's name and anything and everything I'm offering at his feet. So that is very important. Along with that, constantly I need to practice this sense control. So this both, they go together, because when I practice sense control, then to that extent, my mind is available for chanting Lord Krishna's name. Otherwise, if my mind is constantly all 5 directions, only thinking about material things and being involved with all the things that is happening in the world as if they are for me, then my mind gets fragmented, disintegrated. So I need to have the self-control so that my mind is available to chant Lord Krishna's name. So that is important. Now, if I see Lord Krishna in everything, and I am not worried about whatever happens to me, that is absolutely the best thing, right? So that is the way we look at the world. We look at the world as nothing but an embodiment of Lord Krishna. And I chant Lord Krishna's name and I surrender whatever comes to me at his feet. So what is the first step for a person to meditate without any diversion or wandering mind about something? So here, I want to mention that today we have so many different apps for meditation, and a lot of people can just plug in one of those Headspace apps or any one of those things, right? But the question is, after I finish that meditation with anything, whether it is the Headspace app or whether I'm sitting in my room, does it lead to a sense of peace which I can carry throughout the whole day? That is the important thing. That is very important, is the reason why I do meditation. So if I'm not able to do that, then what should I do? So what is the first step for a person to meditate? So even before one person starts meditation, it is important that we put our life in order. So for example, from the body level, taking care of simple things like making sure I have a sound, restful sleep. I'm eating sattvic food. Then all the people around me, I have the sense of oneness, which is why the second chapter is so very important, because it tells me about how I need to lead a life. So when I do all this, when I lead my life with a sense of oneness, when I do things with all the good values, then what happens is when I sit to meditate, my mind will not wander. So to prevent my mind from wandering, first I need to understand the knowledge of the scriptures. That is very important. However, if I want to look at meditation as, say, japa, now that is different. Japa is concentration. Japa is chanting the name of the Lord. Now that can be done. That can be done along with everything else. But really deep meditation, which when we come to chapter 6, we will go into the meditation. But prior to that, these chapters will help us to calm our mind so that our mind is ready for meditation. It's available to meditate. So if we don't do that, our mind will always be wandering. And so this is an important aspect to keep in mind. The meditation techniques that I do, I always make sure that we incorporate a little bit of this teaching in such a way that the mind becomes calm and it stays calm. And then when you do meditation, to that extent, you can take that bhavana of meditation into your work. So can you explain a little more on the ladder of rise and how can one just think of this? I know it's hard for a normal person to even think about what does Lord Krishna say about how a person can first start thinking. So Meena's question is about not even climbing the ladder of rise, because as you know, the very first step of the ladder is mastering of the senses. And let me go to that particular. So it is a mastering of the senses. So her question is, even before climbing this, how do I master the senses? So the answer is actually pretty simple, which is we need to start simplifying our life. We need to really see this aspect, which is the second ladder, which is the likes and dislikes, to see what are those areas of my life where I have strong emotions. That is the aspect. How do I lead a life where I don't have too strong emotions, too strong opinions? All these things are in this realm of likes and dislikes. So that is the thing we need to think about. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I suddenly heard some kind of vacuum. So I wanted to make sure that is, yeah. So in order to master the senses, again, when I have this Krishnarpanam Buddhi, anything and everything I'm doing it for the Lord. To that extent, my senses also becomes controlled. And in that, Lord, when I rest, I also find that my likes and dislikes comes down. So this is, I would say, as one way to, as the first step is trying to see what are the areas where I have strong likes and dislikes, strong opinions, and trying to see how I can, have that sense of oneness with people that will help us to start getting into this ladder. If anybody has any thoughts on those or questions, please do send my way and we can discuss it again next week. Okay, so let's move on to the shloka number 69. So in shloka number 68, which is the prelude to the 69, or it is a finishing of finishing of that portion, we discussed this is that part of the control of the desires. So about 10 of these verses were dedicated to it. So now we are coming to the Lakshana of Sthita Prajna again. We're going to be discussing about how does the Sthita Prajna person view the world. So that is the portion from 69. So it's a very, very poetic verse. It may even sound a little confusing. So this is why I was saying it would be good to have your full attention for this particular shloka. And it is all about how does the Sthita Prajna really looks at the world. So here you will see, he will show about how two terms Lord Krishna has introduced. One is the person who is very controlled. That is one who is already controlled over senses. But the second term that he has introduced is the word munihi. Munihi, which is manana shilavan, who's a muni. That is the person who has studied all scriptures, who is well established in this wisdom. This word muni actually came again in shloka 56, I think. Dukheshvarnudvigna manaha. In that shloka, the word muni was mentioned about how this person is so self-controlled. So these two things helps this person to view the world. So one needs to be able to be there to enjoy the world, but you don't want the world to enjoy you. So that is the self-control we are talking about. And the person needs to be muni. So the shloka goes this way. Yanisha sarvabhutanam. Yanisha sarvabhutanam. Tasyam jagarti sanyami. Tasyam jagarti sanyami. Yasyam jagrati bhutani. Yasyam jagrati bhutani. Sa nisha pashyato munehe. Sa nisha pashyato munehe. So you see there is a few sort of confusing terms, night, day, and then this Sthita Prajna, who is this Muni, and normal people like us. So the shloka says, that which is Nisha, Ya Nisha, that which is night. Okay, for Sarva Bhutanam, that is for all beings. So that which is night, Tasyam Sanyami Jagrati. Tasyam Sanyami Jagrati. That is the Sanyami, who is a self-controlled person or who is a very disciplined person. He is wide awake. So that which is night for others is actually day for this self-controlled person or this Mahatma. Then second line says, Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani, Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani, that which is day for all these beings, all these normal people, all this, people. Sa Nisha Pashyato Munehi. So he, for the Muni, for the Munihi, it is Nisha. So it is Nisha or it is night. For that person, it is night for him. So, so that which is night for some normal people is day for him, and that which is night for the Muni is actually day for others. So that's what he is trying to say. Okay. So what does this really mean? What is this? What does this night mean? What does this day mean? And all this, we will try to look at it as in this next particular thing, which I have, where I have a nice picture. So according to Vedanta, night always signifies darkness or ignorance. Ignorance, or it can also lead to confusion, right? Because night is where you really don't see all this names and forms. Everything somehow seems to become such a dark thing. So here he's trying to say that a man of self-control, this Sanyami person, for that person, that this world of familiar forms and everything, he is just as you're awakened to the waking state from this world of dream in which you're being stifling all the time, you're suffering for that person. So this night is basically this whole world, which of names and forms is actually, doesn't mean much to him at all. So this, even though this person, lives like any one of us and faces the same thing, but for that person, this world of everything that we see, the world of sorrows and tragedies and disappointments, everything, etc., they are all actually doesn't mean much at all. For us, it means a lot, right? Because we place a lot of emphasis on the reality to it. But for the reality to it, in the sense, everything that happens during daytime for us is real, because I can see the things, I can smell, I can touch, and everything. But for a realized person, the same day is like a dream, because he or she recognizes that this dream is also very transient. This day, what he looks at it is very transient, and therefore it is like a dream. And dreams happen mostly when it happens in our own mind, right? And it happens at nighttime. And of course, we do daydream. That's a different question altogether. But here we're looking at the dream, which happens at night. And since that happens during night, for a realized person, that whole day aspect is really like a night. So this is the idea behind why for a Muni, for a person of wisdom, who is awakened to that state of reality, that person sees basically the whole world as actually nothing but that one Paramatma alone. And for such a person, so that person doesn't see the names and forms. And whereas a normal person sees the names and forms, and therefore it is like a night. We basically put a lot of attention to this. So nighttime is actually like a veil. It just really throws confusion. And, during nighttime, when we have this dream, we see that this one person me alone is in everything, right? I myself have become the whole thing. I've divided myself into different parts and I participate in this drama. So too, when we look at this world as something as so many different divisions, then that is why that is the comparison between this dream and the waking state. So for us, when we look at the waking state, in the wake state, when everything has been divided and everything, and we look at that as real, so that division in our own mind, and which is very temporary, that one is actually a kind of a confusion which has arisen because of me alone. Okay. So that's the whole idea of why the night is compared to, we'll go back to this one. And therefore, when it is night for all beings, that self-controlled man keeps awake. So for a realized person, for a Sita Prajna, even if it is night, for the controlled person, it doesn't matter. That person has awakened to that sense of realization. But yasyam jagriti bhutani, so this part is, I think, pretty clear. When all beings are awake, it is night for the person, because the sage basically sees even that day as nothing but a state of confusion, or sees as nothing but he actually sees the oneness. He doesn't see the way anybody would see it. But if there is that sense of division and everything, that would be considered as a kind of a state of ignorance, which the sage is able to see in and through it and recognize that it is like nothing, like the mirage in a desert. Just like how a mirage, you can see the mirage there, but yet you see that it is nothing but water. That is the same way that a sage would see the world. So let's see the comparison between how an ordinary person or this different being sees the world versus the Sanyami Muni, where I say the person who's self-controlled, who's a person of steady wisdom. For an ordinary person, because he or she places so much of reality to the world, the senses are used to get happiness out of all these sense objects. And so it is like nectar. It is really a pleasurable sensation. But for a Muni, these sense indulgence is like poison. I mean, he or she doesn't care about it and doesn't really want to indulge in the sense of the way a normal person would. For an ordinary person, the world of objects are there only to achieve greatness in the sense of name, fame, wealth. But for a Sita Prajna, a Sanyami Muni, this world is there to recognize that Paramatma. In and through all the division, the person wants to recognize that Paramatma. For an ordinary person, the whole world, this waking state, the daylight, is very real. But for a person who is a Sita Prajna, this world is actually an illusion, which is just nothing but, Maya. And for an ordinary person, we place a lot of attention to the body, mind, intellect complex. And whereas for a realized person, the self is actually immortal. He revels in that state. Whereas we are constantly in this area of placing reality for the body, engaging in the senses over there. So that's the difference between the two, as shown here. So in this regard, I wanted to put also one beautiful kind of a subhashita, we call this, which sort of, tells us the difference between a Muni and between a normal person. I will read this in Sanskrit, and the meaning is also given here. It says, Asha nama manushyanam, kaschit ashcharya shrinkala, yaya baddha pradavanti, muktaha tishtanti panguvat. Yaya baddha pradavanti, muktaha tishtanti panguvat. So it is, it's such a paradox, because it says desire is that thing which makes people somewhat bound by a chain. So, the desire kind of binds, it creates a bondage, and it keeps us tied to this world. We don't want to leave this world. This is why we keep taking birth again and again and again. And so when we are tied by this desire, what happens? We are constantly multitasking. We are working so much. 8 hours a day is not enough. We work 15 hours a day. And so we are running fast. So desire, binds us, it ties us down, but we run fast. But then a liberated person, yaya bada pradhavanti muktaha. Muktaha means a liberated person. Such a person remains as if he's panguvat, like he's like a lame person. He's handicapped. He's not moving at all. He's just stuck in one place. So that's the difference between us and a Sita Prajna. So so I thought this ties in well with the shloka here. And it is, I think in one previous lecture, I also spoke about this, what do you call that wheel? We are in this wheel which is rotating on and on and on. We are just constantly running. And whereas the Sita Prajna is totally liberated, and it's as if he or she is in one place. So that's the difference. And so a Mahatma is a person who recognizes that he or she doesn't have to go anywhere, because that happiness that the person is looking for is already within himself or herself. So why even go anywhere? Just be santushtaha, atmanyeva atmanat santushtaha, that aspect. Recognize his happiness is here, and he or she has nothing to do. The only job that person has to do is to totally abide in that self. So no need to run here and there, chasing after those illusions. That's the whole idea of this shloka here. So this brings to the next shloka, number 70 here, which shows about how, such a person, such a Mahatma, they may be living in this world, and they may not necessarily indulge in any of the senses, right? They may not necessarily go out. The senses may not go out, looking for things. But then the question might come: what about all the senses that the person, which goes into the person? We all go out, we walk around, we look at things. Sometimes we like to go to the mall and walk. I know I've been talking about walking in the mall quite a bit here, but I've not been walking actually in the mall, but it's a good example because you see so many shops there. So what happens is that somehow the eyes, they just bring all the senses in, right? Then what happens? Doesn't such a person get affected by it? Don't they get, more desires from this? What happens in such cases? So this is the part that another beautiful shloka here, very poetic, and it is actually in a different ragam altogether. We saw the same raga in the beginning of second chapter, but after that now is the one it is coming up. But I wanted to, I guess, before coming to that shloka, I wanted to introduce a shloka from Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad actually has a very similar shloka. So I thought I'll put this up. So just to whet your appetite for some of the Upanishads. So this shloka, which I wanted to put this before coming to the shloka, is Yatha nadhyasyandamana samudre Yatha nadhyasyandamana samudre Astam gachanti nama rupe vihaya Astam gachanti nama rupe vihaya Tatha vidwan nama rupadimuktaha. Tatha vidwan nama rupadimuktaha. Parat param purushamuvait. Parat param purushamupaiti divyam. Parat param purushamupaiti divyam. So this analogy, which has, which you see Mundaka Upanishad here, which is now shown in Bhagavad Gita as well, is just like rivers flowing towards and into the ocean, they disappear upon entering it. And they lose their identity of name and form. So also the wise man, here it says man, but wise person, frees himself of his name and form and identity upon attaining that Paramatma, upon attaining the divine nature of the highest of the high, which is the Supreme Purusha. So a wise person totally, when comes in contact or recognizes or realizes their own divine nature, such a person has lost his or her own identity, just like how rivers, and we know that all rivers, like Ganga, Mother Ganga, she flows all the way from the top of the Himalayas. She starts at Gangotri. Where does she go? She ends up in the Bay of Bengal, in the ocean of Bay of Bengal. We have all these other rivers like Nile and many other rivers here too. They all end up in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. And once they enter there, we don't know which water entered there, right? So that's the beauty of this Mundaka Upanishad shloka. So now we will go to the Bhagavad Gita shloka here, which says, Apuryamanam achala pratishtham. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham. Samudramapah pravishanti yadvat. Samudramapah pravishanti yadvat. Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve. Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve. Sashantimapnoti na kamakami. Sashantimapnoti na kamakami. So here he's showing. Did I drop something? Can you hear me? Hello? Hariom?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yes,
don't
we can hear you. Yeah.
know. Okay. Suddenly I lost my video. Yeah, there it is. So you can see that Mundaka Upanishad, the shloka, which is related to this Bhagavad Gita here, it says Apuryamanam. Apuryamanam. So what kind of an ocean is this? What kind of a samudram is this? It is Apuryamanam. Apuryamanam means it is ever full. It is totally full. So we know the oceans are always full. It is Achalam, and Pratishtam. It is Achalam means it is still. It is, and then Pratishtam means it is established, or it is Pratishta, or established. I guess that's a good word. Established in this stillness. So this ocean is all the time full. It is totally independently full. And this ocean is always established in that stillness. When does that happen? Well, it happens even when you have trillions or billions of gallons of water, which, they pour into this ocean almost every microsecond. Every microsecond, you have all this waters which are flowing into it. But then what happens? The level of the ocean never changes. Samudramapa pravishanti yadtadvat. So it just doesn't change at all. It still remains absolutely full. It doesn't make any difference at all to the ocean, whether one river is coming or 10 rivers are coming, or if for whatever reason it's a hot day and the rivers have dried up, even then the ocean doesn't really care. So too, this Mahatma, Tatvat Kamaha Yam Pravishanti Sarve. So too, such great people, this Sthita Prajna, so too this Mahatmas, in whom all these desires, just like the rivers of water, all these desires, as I mentioned, when you're walking in the mall, you can see thousands of sense pleasures entering into the mind, right? So too, all these desires, they enter from all sides. And yet, such a person remains unmoved. Yam pravishanti sarve. He totally established that stillness or the tranquility which the person is. And sa shantim apnoti. Such a person is filled with that supreme peace. Sa shantim apnoti. Apnoti means he gets or is filled. However, not really a kama kami. So, whereas normal people like us or ignorant people, such a person who is a desire of desires indicating that person who is constantly wanting something. Such a person is not the case here, but everything else applies to that Mahatma. So that's the description, very beautiful. And it really talks about how the ocean just never, is interrupted at all, is never really upset. And this is just to give you an idea of, I just got some NASA pictures here. So I thought I'd put it here, from a NASA picture, which shows how so many different rivers are flowing into this ocean. And, but even as it enters into the ocean, you can see the stillness of this ocean itself. And that's the comparison of the aspect of a Mahatma. It's just not changed at all. So wise man is like the ocean, Samudra. And just like how you have this ocean, which has got, mudras, Samudra. Samudra means that which is got many mudras, that mudra means signs. And, sometimes the ocean can show sometimes the waves which are, turbulent, or sometimes it can be very, calm. But the ocean is just one aspect of it. So too, the Mahatma, many things can enter, but he or she is completely, not affected at all. Any amount of desires can go, but the ocean remains unaffected. So the mudras, basically, they are signs of this one, just reflects the various kind of desires that may potentially go into the ocean or, go into the Mahatma's mind, but the Mahatma is totally not affected. Another example which Sant Jnaneshwar has given is a wise man, a person can be compared to the sun. And in this sun, you have, any amount of candle light can never really, equal the light of the sun. So the sun also doesn't need any candlelight itself, indicating that an ocean, for example, can remain independent of the rivers. A Mahatma can be independent of the desires. Okay, so again, just another analogy to show this aspect of this shloka itself. So that is the Lakshana of a Sthita Prajna. A Sthita Prajna is so full, so self-satisfied that no amount of desires can ever, equal the happiness. After all, we all, indulge in a desire only for happiness. But the person is so full of happiness already. What would small happiness, like in our case, whether it's a chocolate or a toy or a job or a promotion or anything, all these are like this candlelights. None of these are going to satisfy that happiness or the fullness, which is at Mahatma.
Where are the specs?
So this brings to the next shloka, which is 71, where you have, we are going to talk about how to get that peace what are the 4 things that needs to be kept in mind? 4 things which will lead to that peace. And in a previous shloka, we already saw how that peace equals the happiness. I think it was shloka, I have to go back and check, but that shloka talked about how where there is peace, there is happiness. So in shloka 77, which we will chant, Vihaya kamanya sarvan, Vihaya kamanya sarvan, Umans charati nisprahaha, Umans charati nisprahaha, Nirmamo nirahankaraha, Nirmamo nirahankaraha, Sashantimadhigacchati, Sashantimadhigacchati. So again, talking about that Sita Prajna person who has attained the supreme peace. So how did the person attain the supreme peace? Well, such a person has abandoned all desires. Well, again, abandoning not in the sense of saying that, of suppressing oneself, but it is through an understanding, through a sense of fulfillment. Again, the ocean example is a perfect example, saying that the ocean is already full. It doesn't need the rivers. So to such a person, with that kind of an attitude, has abandoned the desires. And so Puman referring to that person, charati indicating moving, nisprihaha, Spriha, we came across this word before. Spriha means craving or longing. So such a person has no craving or longing. And then nirmamaha. Nir is the upasarga or a prefix which is added to the main noun here, mama, mamatvam. Mama means minus, this is my cup, this is my phone, this is my house. So that is the nirmamatvam. So such a person does not have any of that mamatvam. And nirahankaraha, that is no individuality, no I-ness. This is, it is I did it, or, it's only because of me. That is the ahankar speaking. So nir ahankar, meaning no ahankar. So when there is no ahankar, then automatically, so this is the culprit. The very first culprit is when I don't exhibit my ego or individuality, then what happens is I do not claim as this as mine. It's all, after all, the Lord's. So we are living in the Lord's place. Nothing belongs to me. So when I am devoid of that minus, then what happens is automatically I don't get attracted to desires. So there is no nispraha of wanting something. So there's a difference between a desire and a longing. A desire happens when I have never tasted something, and I taste something. There is a desire is created, and then spruha is longing for that same thing. Because I tasted this thing once, I feel that I have to have it. So that is the longing. So when a person doesn't even have any of ahankar, such a person doesn't even have that longing for something. And then such a person, gives up, is able to easily give up this aspect of desires. So this is what I have it here in 4 different stanzas here, 4 different ways, clear instructions. Vihaya kaman, which is giving up any kind of desire-prompted actions. Nispraha, giving up this longing. Nirmama, giving up this sense of minus, it's mine. Nirahankaraha, giving the sense of I-ness. So once having gone through this, the last shloka we are coming to is the shloka number 72, which talks about the glory of this knowledge. In in Vedanta Shastra, we always say this is the phalam. What is the phalam? What is in it, quote unquote, for me? What do I get out of all this? So what it is talking about is that absolute state of mind. As we saw before, mind is the culprit. Mind is the one which is always giving me problems. And for a Sthita Prajna, it is that Brahma Sthiti. So, Sa Esha Brahmanishta Stuyate. This Brahmanishta aspect is what is praised in this last shloka. Now, we can see at the end of this chapter, having come to this chapter, Arjuna is probably, saying that, yeah, Krishna, you may say this, that I have to go to do this, this, and this. And what is a guarantee that I will really get to the state of mind? I may die at any point in time. Will I still be eligible for something like this? So that is the aspect that Lord Krishna is addressing in this last shloka of 72, is chapter 2. Esha Brahmi Stitif Partha. Esha Brahmi Stitif Partha. Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati. Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati. Stitva Syam Antakalepi. Stitva Syam Antakalepi. Brahma Nirvana Mritchati. Brahma Nirvana Mritchati. So we see that once you have gone through that 4 steps given in the previous shloka, one attains that abidance in that state of bliss or peace, which is called as this Brahmic state. And this is what Lord Krishna assures people. And he says that even antakale api, even at the very last moment, even in the deathbed, at that moment in time, if one has realized that state of Brahman, then one attains that oneness. That Brahmic state is the assurance which is given by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. So that having said, I just wanted to put the qualities here of the Sthita Prajna that we have seen so far, which is being that Atmanyeva Atmana Tushtaha, desireless, and then being totally unshaken by adversity, having that neither pleased with, again in the shlokas Dukkeshvanu Dvikna Manaha, and then the next one also, and then be having complete self-control, tranquility, established in complete fullness, and ultimately this oneness with Brahman itself. So this is the last shloka here, and so is the concluding verse. So I was going to do this, but we will review this next week again. I wanted to show how we had talked about how shlokas from chapter 2 is basically the contents for the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, and how each one of these shlokas are going to be discussed in detail in chapters 3 and 4, or 5 and 6, then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, then 16, 15, and then the 18th one. Ultimately, we have all these things which we'll be discussing. So next week, our agenda is going to be, since we have discussed second chapter in detail, my whole point is just to have 1 or 2 slides to discuss a summary of what we have seen through this 72 shlokas. Then we will chant the whole second chapter, and we will end the second chapter with that Om Tat Sadi Sat Sat shloka. And then if anybody has any questions, I'll just open up for a short while for any questions, which we will discuss. So the format is going to be a little different, as you can see here. And finally, if we have time, I would like to also do an introduction to the third chapter. So this is the whole thing we will do next week. So with that, we will stop here. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्री गुरु